In many Major League sports, trading a young, hopeful prospect is considered a taboo. As in, it's something that is kind of socially prohibited, especially from the fans. And this is because of the what if conundrum. What if we trade our young player and he turns into a superstar? What if the first round pick we trade turns into the next Matt Barzal? And I say Matt Barzal because the Islanders pick was actually originally owned by the Edmonton Oilers, which the Oilers actually traded to get Griffin Reinhart. Or perhaps even worse than that, the San Jose Sharks traded their first round pick to Ottawa, and this pick may actually be a lottery pick in a stacked 2020 draft. So trading a young star is something that will always contain a high level of risk, even if only a handful of prospects turn into NHL regulars. And it is a risk that may end up just blowing up in your face. But even though this is considered a taboo in the NHL, many GMs justify this transaction because perhaps they have the assets to be traded away, or perhaps they just need one more piece to push them over the hill of being a championship caliber team. I actually attempted to gather some historical data to create a graph about the number of first round picks traded since 2010. And honestly, I was a bit surprised. There seemed to be no trend, and these trades were just very sporadic. Now, there definitely is a lot of variables in play here, and there was a correlation based on star players being shopped around at that time, because usually a star player will have some type of first round pick gathered in some type of bundle, and also just the perceived strength of the draft that the pick belonged to. And something important to add is that players just develop at a different pace. And so some players just flourish under different conditions, different environments, which also may play a large role in development. In today's video, we're going to take a look at NHL players that were traded away too soon. And if you're not subscribed already, make sure to hit that subscribe button for some more awesome hockey content, guys. Your support has been amazing. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate all of you so much. We will start with Filip Forsberg, and Forsberg has had a very interesting path in his NHL career. Heading up into the 2012 NHL draft, he was actually considered a consensus top 5, if not top 3 pick for a large part of this season. And then heading up into the actual draft, scouts dropped him from being a potential top 3 pick to outside of the top 10 because they really just weren't confident in Allsvenskan. Now, Allsvenskan is a second-tier Swedish league, and they thought that because he wasn't playing in the SHL, that they might have been overrating him his whole entire time there. And because of this, and because of many teams were taking defensemen, Forsberg slid into the Washington Capitals' hands at number 11. However, that would basically be the end of Forsberg's journey in Washington. Before playing a single NHL game for the Capitals, he was traded to Nashville for Michael Latta and Martin Erat. And Forsberg was developing extremely well in Allsvenskan. He was the captain of Team Sweden for the World Juniors and was traded for Erat, who was already seeing massive regression in his game. And then also Latta, who was never an NHL regular. And since then, Forsberg has been leading the charge of the Predators' offensive system. He's nearly scored 5 consecutive 30-goal seasons. He's on pace for 32 goals this season. And this is a prime example of why trading a young, highly touted prospect is extremely risky. As Phil Forsberg showed all the signs and did eventually turn into a lead scoring winger in the NHL, whereas Erat only played about 60 games for the Washington Capitals. Next, we have Brent Burns, and Burns was of course a part of the 2003 NHL draft class, an insanely talented class that has gone down as one of the best drafts in NHL history. But I will say the 2015 NHL draft might be able to compete with the 2003 draft just because of the sheer amount of quality players we are already seeing just 5 years later. And Brent Burns was actually drafted 20th overall from the Minnesota Wild, and he was actually drafted as a right wing, but he would spend some time going on the back end and then kind of rotating around. But he definitely was way more suited for a defenseman as he had elite vision, size, and he was a great outlet passer. And Brent Burns actually did have a long career with the Wild, unlike some other players here. He spent 8 years in the organization and he slowly developed into a very solid player. In 2011, he was actually traded for Charlie Coyle, Devin Setoguchi in a first round pick, so definitely a decent return, but in comparison to the player that Burns would eventually develop into playing full-time defense, the value was just way off. Because when Brent Burns joined a system where he was playing only defense, it allowed him to create a better rhythm, and he developed his game much better. And so the Minnesota Wild lost on a Norris-winning defenseman. Now, I will say though, Charlie Coyle definitely did develop into a solid player for the Wild. Now, he did recently get traded. Devin Setoguchi regressed very fast after the acquisition, and the 2011 pick was Zach Phillips, who did not turn into an NHL regular. Next, we have Ryan McDonagh. When you think about McDonagh, you think about the Tampa Bay Lightning with the team he's on right now, and of course the New York Rangers, as he was the captain of the Rangers for 4 seasons. However, many people tend to forget that Ryan McDonagh was originally a Montreal Canadiens draft pick, and the Montreal Canadiens ended up giving up on the 20-year-old Ryan McDonagh, and this trade is considered to be one of the worst trades in modern-day NHL history. Ryan was originally drafted 12th overall by the Montreal Canadiens in 2007, and while he was playing college hockey in the NCAA, he was developing an elite two-way game. However, in the summer of 2009, the Montreal Canadiens traded Ryan McDonagh for two players who spent the majority of their career in the minors, and then of course Scotty Gomez. Now I will say that Scott Gomez was a good player, but he was already in the league for a long time at this point, and he would regress the next few seasons, and then left the Canadiens organization entirely. And then playing for the Rangers, McDonagh developed into an elite top 2 defender for the New York Rangers, a piece that would be a perfect fit on this current Montreal Canadiens blue line, and this is just another example of a high-risk trade when you trade a highly touted young prospect. Next, we have Teuvo Teravainen, and this trade was honestly just a massive head-scratcher. Teravainen was a highly skilled, highly regarded player developing extremely well in Liga. He was originally a 2012 pick for the Chicago Blackhawks, and Teuvo broke into the Hawks lineup in 2014, and he showed flashes of high-end skill. Throughout the next 2 seasons, he was a bit inconsistent but showed the upside of being a top 6 winger. And then, in a very bizarre situation, the Blackhawks in a cap crunch bundled in Brian Bickle and Teuvo Teravainen for a 2nd and 3rd round pick, so they actually received no roster players, and they traded a very highly regarded young player. And then throughout the next few seasons in Carolina, Teravainen would gain more ice time and develop extremely well, with every single season showing constant progression. And then last season, Teuvo put up a career-high 76 points, 21 goals, 76 points, and he was given up as part of a cap dump. Just a crazy situation, and Teuvo has been developing into a superstar at the NHL level. And this season, he has continued to produce really well, putting up 45 points in 49 games, and he has been the perfect duo partner for Sebastian Aho. Next, we have William Carlson, and Carlson had a very unique situation. Originally a 2nd round Ducks pick from 2011, Carlson was actually another product of being severely underrated because he played in Allsvenskan, versus of course the SHL. And honestly, the more I look into these Swedish prospects we consider steals, many of them were playing in Allsvenskan. Elias Pettersson, David Pastrnak, Phil Forsberg, William Carlson are all considered massive draft steals who were ridiculed for playing in Allsvenskan. And after that, Carlson ended up having a great development path in the SHL, and he was given up not once, but twice in his career. Because after a very short stint with the Ducks, he was shipped to the Blue Jackets in a package deal for James Wisniewski. I will say though, Wisniewski definitely was a good defenseman, but at that point, his days in the NHL were limited, and he actually only ended up playing 14 games before retiring, so the Ducks gave up on Carlson for a guy who only played 14 games. So to emphasize the situation, the Ducks gave up on William Carlson, who was producing extremely well in the SHL, on a vet in Wisniewski, who at the time was really just falling off the cliff in his career. And William Carlson in the Blue Jackets system was placed in a bottom 6 role with limited ice time and no special teams. He put up some points, but definitely was not demonstrating the superstar upside that he has today. So when the Vegas expansion rolled around, Carlson was just a product of not being able to demonstrate his full potential, and so he got scooped up by the Vegas Golden Knights. The next season, Carlson's ice time would jump by nearly 6 minutes per game while receiving top special teams time. And Carlson just absolutely exploded. He went from scoring 6 goals to scoring 43 goals and 78 points. Just an amazing storyline. And not only that, is that Carlson was also 6th in Selke voting, and he also won the Lady Byng Trophy. And to add a cherry on top, Carlson would then sign a team-friendly deal for $5.9 million over 8 years, which is definitely a steal of a contract compared to some contracts being signed today. Next, we have Tony DeAngelo, and Tony was originally drafted by Tampa Bay in 2014 and was a prolific scorer in the OHL, as he was showing dominance in an offensive defenseman role. And he had the production and skill to be a top 5 pick, but fell all the way down to number 19 because he was flagged for having attitude issues. And Tony just continued to dominate the OHL and even produced very well in the AHL. And he was actually traded out of the Tampa Bay organization in 2016 for just a 2nd round pick, so clearly Tampa Bay was experiencing some type of internal issues here. He then split his time in 2017 between the Coyotes and Tuscan Roadrunners, and he did produce really well. Defensively, he still needed to work and still needs work today, but his offense was shining through. Now, there has been some rumblings of conflict within the Coyotes organization, or it just may be a coincidence, as the Coyotes then shipped out Tony in a 1st round pick for Stepan and Darcy Kemper, which honestly is a very fair trade. But today, DeAngelo has just exploded in development. 37 points in 47 games. He just put up a 5-point game just a couple weeks ago in a single game, and he's really shown the upside of a premier offensive defenseman in the NHL. Lastly, we have Dougie Hamilton. And Hamilton, interestingly enough, was actually only drafted by Boston 9th overall because the Bruins received 2 first-round picks for Phil Kessel from Toronto. And Hamilton was a very dominant defenseman in the OHL. He developed very well and made an instant impact in the Bruins lineup. And in the season before he was traded, he actually put up 42 points in 72 games, so just great production from a young defenseman. And not only that, but he also played a fantastic defensive and a reliable game from a young age, and he was only just getting better. And Hamilton just showed all the traits of being an elite top 2 defender. He's a massive body standing in at 6'6", he can skate with a good tempo, he has tremendous offensive capabilities, and is very reliable in his shutdown role. And to add the cherry on top, he's also a highly coveted right-handed defenseman. Yet in 2015, the Bruins traded him for first and 2 second-round picks. Now, it is extremely hard to acquire top-tier defensemen in the NHL. He was already proving to be that guy, and this transaction was just very lopsided. Now, this was the 2015 NHL draft, which just had crazy talent, but the Boston Bruins made a pretty horrible decision by drafting off the board where they could have just struck gold in this draft. Now, I will say though that Jake DeBrusk is a great player, so they definitely did make a mistake there, but with the pick that they did receive from Hamilton, they drafted Zach Senyshyn. So who do you rather have, Zach Senyshyn or Dougie Hamilton? I don't know, that's a tough one. But it also has been rumored that Dougie Hamilton has had some attitude issues, so who really knows what is happening behind the scenes. But to think that Dougie Hamilton would turn out to be an elite top 2 defender, you'd think that the pros just may outweigh the cons, or at the very least, they drive a better return. Because today, Hamilton is a superstar and a top defender in the entire NHL. And it is very unfortunate that Dougie Hamilton just got injured, because he was having a career year, 40 points in 47 games, a tremendous defensive game. Go take a look at his advanced stats, they are just crazy. And it's currently in the top candidates alongside of Roman Josi and Carlson for the Norris discussion. It is very hard, if not impossible, to predict every prospect's development curve, and general managers do not want to be known as the GM that created one of the most lopsided deals in history. But funny enough, I do actually understand each side. In many cases, teams are receiving a top 6 talent for unproven talent and or draft picks. And the chances of their draft pick or player that they end up trading exploding in development is really just not high in odds. But yet again, in the world of hockey, these transactions will be looked at as taboo. But anyways guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Those are some players that were traded way too soon in their career. If you guys have any other examples, make sure to comment down below and make sure to hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. Anyways guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Your support again has been amazing. I really hope you guys are enjoying these videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you guys later.